Hello, all of my hopeless romantic friends, and my dejected, shallow, vapid, modernist enemies. It's been a minute since we've been here, hasn't it? A book review on Zach Pieper's channel? What? That's a thing still? Yeah, it's been a while, and it's gonna get a little bit more consistent because my life is finally settled into something vaguely resembling a rhythm, and that rhythm includes time to read. So all of the books that are in my TBR and but both to be read, which is synonymous really with to be reviewed pile, are now going to get read. I'm currently working through one that I want to get done hopefully by tomorrow. I'm going to have to really put in some hours on it tonight because we're going to be having the author on the Twitch stream to sort of hang out, talk about his book, and just, do Twitch stream things. Link in the description if you want to go check that out. But in the meantime, we're here to talk about another author's work, Penelope Phosphene by Nicholas Leonard. Nicholas solicited Team Adventurous for a review a while back, and I am sincerely sorry that it took us so long to get to it. Life. And I'm not going to make any of you or him wait yet another second. So let's get into it. So for those of you who have been here before with one of my reviews, you know I follow a system that I created. The system is called COMP. Characters, originality, message, symbolism, plot, prose. Obviously that's not the order that I do them in the review. I just put them in that order so that it, it spells a word when I so nice. The order I am going to list them in the video is plot, characters, message and symbolism, prose and originality. So, to start this review off with plot. Unfortunately, I don't really have anything nice or good to say about the plot. And this is due to its high level of genericness. I don't know if there's genericality. What would be the word there? It's highly generic. To summarize, we have a protagonist, a male protagonist, who had a bad relationship end before the book starts chronologically, and we are dropped into him struggling to cope and going around doing things he really shouldn't be doing, namely shooting jukeboxes at local diners because the music they play reminds him of his ex. And the setting, which is almost synonymous with the plot in this book, is the mansion of his benefactor / employer, a rich lady, the titular character, Penelope Phosphene. And they throw a ball in the hopes that they're going to catch this, jukebox shooter. And he almost falls for her niece, and then that falls through. And then there's some shenanigans, and he ends up falling for another girl who worked at the mansion who he's been antagonistic with for the rest of the book. That's a very rough summary of the plot overall. You may have noticed this resembles the plot of many 90s through early 2000s, and I'm sure earlier and later romance novels and movies and subplots that have happened in television shows. It's not original at all. So, obviously, plot takes a huge ding for that. The saving grace of the plot is that it is functional, somewhat logical in structure. It progresses beat by beat. There's no plot holes. So while it does not get a passing grade, because I just can't give you a passing grade on a plot that is so basic and generic, I'm also not going to give you 0 points. We'll say plot gets 40% in this case. Next up, we have characters. Unfortunately, I also don't really have much in the way to say in this category. The characters are somewhat bland, in my opinion. They're not overly complicated. Their backstories are not overly fleshed out. They have just enough backstory and characterization to feel functional and to pass as believable. However, the male protagonist, besides being named Hanky, which is the most absurd name ever, is a walking Shakespearean play caricature of a hopeless romantic romance novel male lead. The rich lady, his benefactor, Penelope Phosphene, is a walking caricature of the rich widow. Likewise, the niece of Penelope Phosphene, who is the red herring love interest of Hanky, the male lead, ends up being just that, a stereotypical cliche red herring love interest. And the girl Hanky ends up falling for is, of course, the rough around the edges but secretly has a heart of gold, with a little bit of a twist, having a shady backstory type ultimate love interest. So yeah, super original stuff there. Groundbreaking, truly. And I don't mean to be a huge dick about it. I just can't be anything less than honest. And it's not that any of the characters were bad. It's not that they were unbelievable. It's just that they were so obviously characters in a story that existed to facilitate the story, and as well as something else which I'll get into 2 sections from now. Overall, I cannot give characters a passing grade either. They basically fall into the same quality scale as plot. We're going to say characters 40%. Message and symbolism, the category that is going to be scored the worst. And you could argue, if you looked at it from a different perspective, that this category should get the best score, which I'll get into. I'll get into that, why I say that, in the next section of the review. But from the way I look at it and the way I analyze literature and the way I see the world, there was no message or symbolism to speak of, really, other than don't be so much of a hopeless romantic jackass that you ruin your life on sheer emotional impulse, and maybe an actual somewhat wholesome message of there's someone for everyone. You just have to keep your eyes open, and it might be the person you never expected, which I suppose is a fairly wholesome and sometimes true message. However, it's cliche, unoriginal, and I didn't feel particularly drawn in by the message, and there was no overwhelming effort to support that message, if that was the message that was being gone for, through the symbolism in the book. So, unfortunately, I'm going to give this category a measly 20%, again, because of the high levels of generic. Generic. I sprinkle that shit on everything.
Now.
For this category, I'd like to give you an analogy. Have you ever met someone who either in real life or in the course of playing a video game spent all of their skill points on a single category? This would be the gym bro who has no personality, doesn't know anything, isn't intelligent, but he can lift a hell of a lot of weight. Yeah, that guy spec'd entirely into strength. Likewise, you have the bookworms who know everything about everything academically. They can give you a mile-long list of historical facts just as fast as they can rattle off complex physics formulas and chemistry formulas and yada yada yada. Those people spent all their points in intelligence. You know, those people. Well, this book spent all of its points on prose. Every single point it had to spec into something, it spent on prose. Look, Nick. I'm going to be familiar here and call you Nick. Author to author. If you're good at poetry and you just want to write a bunch of poetry, do that. Do that. Poetry can have narrative. You can tell a story with a poem. And you can even do it in such a way that the story takes a back seat to the poetry and it does not detract from either. Because this is a romance novel, we expect there to be a certain level of intrigue and suspense and emotional buy-in. And to do that, we have to take care that we put enough thought into our plot that it doesn't feel like it was pulled straight out of any one of several dozen romantic comedies or just straight up romance movies for that matter. And we have to give our characters enough tender love and care that they actually feel like people. And if there's going to be a message, we need to support it with symbolism. That isn't in the line-by-line prose, but rather the symbolism comes in plot devices and elements of the story. This book relies on its prose to seem good. This book relies entirely on the flowery and elevated language to give itself credibility and an air of quality. And it almost pulls it off. I want to be very clear here. The poetry in this book, in terms of the line-by-line writing, is good. I'm just going to pick a random line here. I'm just going to read you something, and hopefully that gives you a good idea. Okay, that was an unfortunate pick. Let's try that again. New Hampshire's forest, dark and fast asleep, verduned itself with sorry shades of blue, as lunar pillars cut between the trees and looked around for madmen on the loose. The book is absolutely chock full of verse like that. And a lot of it's very good. A lot of it impressed me with how beautiful it sounded, the way it was structured, the overall artistry of the language was good. The problem is you can't support an entire book on one element. A book is made of multiple elements. I break them down as characters, originality, message and symbolism, plot and prose. when you try to support a book on one element, it crumbles every time. You can't write a book and hope that your high-quality prose will save the whole thing. Furthermore, there were times in the book where the story, the characters, would have benefited from plain language, where the impact emotionally and the clarity of the plot would have benefited from plain language. But we almost never got plain language. So, prose, the strongest category, still takes a hit. 80%. Now, finally, originality. The overall originality of the book, hook, line, sinker, A to Z, 1 through infinity, originality. It's kind of hard to give it anything above a 0 in a lot of ways. Characters, plot, concept, setting. The only thing original about this book is the exact combination of characters with those specific names and those very specific traits in that specific setting with that specific chain of events. You see what I'm saying? The exact combination of things is the only original aspect. All of the elements have been done before. All of the elements have been combined in a romance before. All of the characters have been seen before. And on the one hand, I get it. There's nothing original under the sun, right? No new sins, yada, yada, yada. But you can at least try. You know what I mean? You can at least smash things together in enough new and interesting ways that it seems original. Or you could be one of these people who sits down and, genuinely tries to make everything as original as possible. And that's not always possible. Some people don't have that skill. True originality is a 1 in a million gift. People like Beethoven, Mozart, in terms of storytelling, Mary Shelley, a few others. I'm sure that I could come up with if I sat down and thought about it long enough. But the point stands. So, I'm going to give originality 0%. Overall, with all the scores added up, we arrive at a measly 36% out of 100. Now, I want people to keep in mind, and I want the author to keep in mind, this is looking at it from a very specific lens as a story. And to be fair to the book and the author, I really don't think that this was truly intended to be a good story. I think that this book was intended to be an exercise in hopeless romanticism, a excuse to put poetry to prose. I could be wrong about that. I invite the author to correct me if I am wrong about that. But that's how I perceive the book, as a piece of art from the author. But I didn't major in poetry. I'm a decent poet, but it's not something I would call my specialty. So I can't grade it like that. I have to grade it the way I would grade any other fictional work, as a story. So that's why I got the grade it did, even though I don't think that that grade is necessarily applicable when we look at the book's true nature / purpose / intention. I'm just trying to be fair because, like I said, the prose really quite good. as line and on a line by line analysis, the artistry of the poetic prose really quite good. Personally, I would recommend, if you're someone who enjoys Shakespeare, if you're someone who enjoys Romance era literature, and by that I mean literature that was, put out around the same time as Mary Shelley was alive, Romance era literature, you'll probably like it. Check it out. If you're someone who likes reading romance stories because you actually enjoy the story and the characters, and you're looking for a romance novel, maybe a pass. Those are my 2 cents. I hope I didn't ruffle any feathers too much, and I appreciate everyone coming back and checking me out, if indeed anyone does. All the links to support me are down in the abyss known as the YouTube description. I sincerely appreciate everyone for sticking around, if indeed you have, not hitting the unsub button. Remember, I am going to be putting out some more artistic content, and now that Caitlin has moved in with me, that's going to be easier to do. I'm going to have a cameraman and someone to help me frame shots and do all the artistic things. Sincerely appreciate you being here. Look to the skies, traveler.